I am from California. I grew up in Los Angeles, and I lived there till I was 17 and graduated high school, and then moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, where I did my undergraduate at Stanford, and then was doing a PhD in psychology when at 25 I came to India on a vacation with a backpack and had an experience standing on the banks of Ganga. I was as goal-oriented, as focused as they come. I had never been told, oh, by the way, there's something else. That was one of my points. I had never been told that. I had never been told, keep your eyes open because there's something else. And so it never occurred to me to look for it. I didn't come to India seeking or searching. I came on a trip, on a vacation. And that which was given to me, standing on the banks of Ganga, was more real than anything I'd experienced in 25 years. And it wasn't even a decision to be made. I mean, as I've shared with you, I was someone who was always deeply committed to truth. And so for me, there was no way to go back. If I were someone who weren't so deeply committed to truth, I could envision trying to lock up the part of me that had just had that experience and pretending it hadn't happened and going back. But because I was so deeply committed to truth, there was no way I was going to let myself do that. And even though it wasn't the package that I had ever anticipated happiness would come in or life would come in, there it was in front of me, and there was no way to deny that that was what I had just seen and what I had just been given. It was an experience that was visual, but it wasn't only visual. It was full, it was all of my senses. It was an experience of being in the presence of the divine. And the only part of it that I can put any words to is, if you imagine that you're looking at the world through a camera lens, or even not a camera lens in reality, but rather than having a full depth of field, you just have background and foreground, right? So people who are photographers or artists know you've got a foreground and then you've got the background. So here's a portrait. If I'm taking your portrait, you would be my foreground. The background would be the trees behind you, and maybe I would decide to make them blurry or not blurry or whatever. My vision split into foreground, background. And in the beginning, when I was seeing it over Ganga, it was all one, and it was just divinity. But then as I turned my head, I got this foreground, background split, so that the foreground stayed divinity, but the background shifted as I moved my head and my visual field changed. So what ended up happening was this experience of divinity was the foreground of whatever I was seeing. So it began with seeing it over the river, but then it stayed with me as I moved my head, and here we had a pillar, and here we had people, and here we had a dog, and it didn't matter where I moved my head, because the foreground stayed the same. I mean, it's almost like if you had a speck in your eye, whatever you looked at, you would have that. But for me, it wasn't a speck, it was this image of the divine. And I burst into tears. And they weren't sad tears, of course, but they also weren't happy tears. They were just tears of the truth, tears of coming home. And it opened me up to what the universe is, and I mean, and I, of course, had no idea what that meant. I had no frame of reference, nothing in which to put it. But I spent about a week with just ecstatic tears pouring down my eyes. I mean, it didn't matter what I looked at. It was so beautiful, and tears just poured down my eyes.